I learned a long time ago that there are secrets in stories. And as I was building our company, especially in the early days, I was reading a ton of biographies. I was reading stories of people who had gone from zero to great success. I would listen to podcasts and even watch movies. And as I've been building and, recording and just getting out there in front of the camera more, questions have been coming up more about, Jamie, will you share more story about your journey? And so I'm going to dive more into story over the coming weeks and tell you stories that might not seem like they actually pertain to business, but truly so much of this growth journey, of this building a business journey, is mastering the inner game. It's resilience, it's grit, it's fortitude, it's being able to plow through when everything inside you is telling you to just give up and quit and go home and just live a normal life, you know? Um, but pressing forward and staying focused and having grit and resilience is something that you enlarge your capacity for through trial and through pressure. And it's healthy pressure that it's any kind of pressure. It's pain even that catalyzes us towards growth. And so I want to share more story about um, pain and just the journey and the joys and the highs and the lows. And along with some of these frameworks that I'm teaching, I really want to get to the heart of the stories and the milestones of my life that has gotten us here that I know is going to take us to the billion and even beyond. And it's not even what can I do, but at the foundation of everything, it always comes back to giving glory to God and realizing that He is the source for everything, that every good and perfect gift comes from Him, and the ability to even gain wealth comes from Him. And so I'm going to start back in 1998 when I was just about to graduate high school. And from the time I was 14 years old, I knew I was going to move to Colorado Springs and do an internship. And I grew up in North Dakota in a little farm town right outside of it called Sawyer. And at 14 years old, we had family friends that came and visited, and they told me about this internship at New Life Church in Colorado Springs. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pack my bags as soon as I graduate at 17 years old, and I'm going to leave home. And I bought my first car at 14, had my first job working at Dairy Queen. And I remember a friend of mine was a mechanic, and he had this two-tone Toyota Camry that he was like, this car would be perfect for you. And it's in mint condition. And even though it's super old, it'll take you really far. And so he sold it to me for $700. It was white and this burnt orange brown with a moonroof. And it was a great car. And by the time I was ready to graduate, I had already moved on to being about ready to buy my second car. And so the year of 1998, before I left home, I was working at the fair. So for about 3 summers, I worked as a carny at the North Dakota State Fair, making cotton candy and dipping cotton apples and just working crazy hours. And my last year, I did fair at night, and then I was working as a flagger during the day. And I was working from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. every day, 6 days a week. And the very first week, I remember I was making $8.68 as a flagger. So I was the girl in the construction zone in the road with the sign, like helping to navigate and manage all the traffic. And that very first week, I had friends who brought me, cold drinks and sandwiches. And I didn't think I was going to make it that week because the sun was so hot, and I came home with like blisters on my face, and I was burnt to a crisp, and I was so exhausted. But I had to save money because I needed $2,500 to buy my car that was going to get me across the country to Colorado, and it was going to take me through my internship. And plus I had to pay tuition for my internship. And, at 14 years old, my father left, my parents were separated. And so I stepped into somewhat of an adult role as a very young girl, helping to pay for the farm and pay for bills. And so I was used to working hard. And as a matter of fact, I was like 5 years old collecting rocks going out and selling it to the mailman. And so I'm sure many of you are the same way. You always had this sort of economic driver. And so here I am at 17 years old. I finally get enough money to buy the car, and it's coming to the point where it's time for me to leave home, and packed all my stuff up, said goodbye to all my friends, and drove across the country and moved to Colorado Springs to intern at the internship at New Life. And I want to talk a little bit about this internship because it had a very high fail rate because it was so challenging and difficult. And when I hear people now, friends, talk about the internship, there's always two polarizing stories. One is it was so hard and it was so terrible that it like did damage. And that is very valid. The internship program was not just physically challenging and spiritually challenging. It was mentally and psychologically challenging, and for some people very damaging. And on the other hand, you have other people who thrived in the pressure and thrived in all the crazy messiness. And we had, there was some people would call it, even just church abuse and just crazy. A lot of the things that I think a lot of people know if you've been behind the curtain of big churches or churches of any size. There was all the crazy stuff, but I spent 2 years of my life. I remember I would call my dad at midnight or at 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes crying and saying, I just can't do this program anymore. It's too hard. And my dad, in all his wisdom, would always say to me, Jamie, bite the bullet. And he would say, have a good night. And then he would leave me in this place of figure it out. And I traveled the world. I went to Africa, and I want to tell you all kinds of stories. I remember the very first big trip we took to internationally outside of we did trips to Mexico. We did trips to California where we're always serving and giving. And before we would go on our very first mission trip, there was a missions training. So they would kidnap us. This is going to sound really crazy. The program no longer exists. They actually changed it into a completely different type of program. But they kidnapped us, threw us in a van, and did what was called missions training. And this was designed to help you grow out of an American mentality, which is Americans can be selfish and loud and rude, typically, or, the idea was let's get you out of American mentality and into missions mentality. We were a bunch of young teenagers, so a lot of us probably could use a little bit of that kind of transformation. So missions training, I still remember, it's in the middle of the night, had no idea that this was going to happen. And my leader, so the first year in this internship, you spend in your team, and you've got second years who are your team leaders who did their first year before you. And so in order to do a second year, you had to have an invitation to come back. And so I remember my leader walking in and waking me up, and I had no idea what was going on. And she blindfolded me, and the other leaders, the guys, came in and picked me up and threw me into a van. And nobody knew what was happening, but I got in there and I heard the voices of my other first year interns, and okay, I was like, I'm not alone. This is part of the thing. And spent the rest of the next 36 hours in some incredibly intense training. And so we did things and I'm going to tell you this story, and it might freak some of you out, but I have a point in everything I'm sharing here. I remember part of the training was you had to go through a food test. And because you're going into these foreign countries, and sometimes there would be foods that may not seem as appealing to an American. And so we had to get out of this mindset of, oh, I'm not going to eat that, or, oh, I don't prefer that, and into the missions mentality, which is, I'm here to serve you, and thank you for feeding me. And thank you. Yes, if you're offering more, I'll have more, even if it's not appealing. And so I'm blindfolded, and at this point, I didn't really have many food issues. I didn't realize I had food issues until this situation happened. And I'm blindfolded. The assistant director was there right next to me, and she's like, Jamie, you're going to have to eat all of this. And don't stop, and keep a smile on your face. So it was almost like emulating, and I'm blindfolded, emulating what it would be like in a situation where you're in a foreign country and you're having to maybe gag down some food and keep a smile on your face. And act like nothing was wrong. And I remember we had to eat with our hands. And so it was this, I could feel it was like crunchy, mushy. And I took my first bite and I had never gagged on food ever before this point. And my heart is racing. I'm like, I have to eat this whole plate. I can feel that there's a lot of food in here. It's like a full plate of food, and I'm barely making it through my first bite. And it was crunchy cartilage and pig's feet, and there was like chunks of chicken fat, and it had been mixed with like mustard and mayonnaise and all these different sauces. So it was just like mushy, the strangest textures and the smells and everything that was happening. And I remember taking that last bite, and we had a certain amount of beads on our bracelet that if you didn't make it through the night with at least one bead left, you didn't pass missions training and you weren't going to get to go. And so I made it through food training and didn't lose any of my beads. But some of my friends actually lost points through the food challenge. And so that was part of the training. And finally got through missions training and then got to go on a trip to Africa. And we flew in to the UK. And then from the UK, we went over to Africa, into Kenya, into Nairobi, and spent weeks there. And one of the very first jungles we went into, so we would always be in these giant, the small trucks, the vans were matatus. And then there were these giant vans that we would all load up into. And what was really amazing about our intern director is that he would always mix fun and adventure with work. And so sometimes we would be like halfway through the day, he would take us on a mini safari and we'd be going through the jungles and we'd be like right next to a pride of lions. Or we had these guides with machetes and they would be hacking down the jungle in front of us so that we could drive into these villages. And the one of the first villages I remember was almost completely underwater. All the huts were on stilts, and you had to hop from stone to stone to stone in order to be able to get into the buildings. And there was all this, like, the animals were in the water, and so there was all this like urine and feces, and so you didn't want to fall in the water or really touch the water. But we would jump, like, there were about 16 of us between first years and second years, and then our directors, and then we had our guides. And I remember, when you're young like that and just full of energy and the passion for what we were doing, to come, and I really truly believe that the mission field is often more for our benefit and transformation than it is even for the people that you're visiting, because I truly believe that a lot of times it's the local community that's going to impact the local community, but that's a whole separate conversation. But here I am in the middle of this jungle in Africa, and we finally get to our first, like, where we're going to put down our sleeping bags. We had to sleep in these body bags because there were bugs and like vermin, and you didn't want to get eaten or stung or bit or anything like that. And we slept on the dirt on the ground, and we got there, and this pastor had been bedridden for months. He had malaria. He'd been bitten by a mosquito, and he was on his deathbed, and they didn't know if he was going to make it. And that was where I remember encountering the power of God like never before. And here we were, this little group of interns, laid hands on this pastor and prayed for him, and went to bed that night and woke up the next morning, and he, for the first time in months, was out of his bed and he was making all of us breakfast. And to this day, I still remember the rejoicing that was happening at the wonder of God and what he did, and also the gratitude I had for all the preparation that we had been through in order to be able to stand in this place and be present in this place in such a way where we were postured correctly to serve. And something that our intern director and the whole program was really about was it was a lot about whoever we were, whatever it was that God wanted to do in us, there needed to be some kind of breaking. And I think that there's probably a lot of controversy around that, like breaking the human spirit. I don't know. All I can say for myself is that I was able to, I believe because of the training I had from my father and my own upbringing and just my perspective through pressing into the Lord. I had a strong relationship with God. I was able to go through those 2 years with perspective, and I was able to be strengthened by the pressure. What I want to share in this particular story is I really believe that in addition to my entire childhood, but that season of going through the hardest program, there was a structured program. Um, there were many times that my interim director or the leaders would have to sit me down and bring strong correction to a lot of us. Actually, there was so much discipline and structure that it was hard. And I look back on those 2 years and I think that I believe was the foundation for the resilience that I have now in business, because you either grew or you died. You ended up either got kicked out or you had to quit the program or you had to grow and you had to go with it and learn and submit to the process. We did. We were expected to be at the YMCA at 5 o'clock every morning, during the week to do our workouts. And so it was physically, sometimes we'd have youth or kids from the youth group come and join the interns for a workout and they'd end up puking their guts out. Like, it was so tough. And um, the interns were there to show up first. We were always the earliest at any event, and we were the last to leave because we were there setting up, cleaning up, serving. This was a mega church. And so if something had to get done, the interns were there to do it. And I also embraced the season where we were all together all the time, working together, working towards a very similar vision of like, let's do this well, let's lead well. And it was a leadership development program. And so I got an invitation to come back my second year, and I got to lead a team of my own. And I look back on that season, I think, man, there's so many things that I could have done differently, and there were so many areas that I failed, and that I didn't hit the mark. But I look back now and think all that training, all that correction, all that sitting down, and it would always make my heart race when I would get, I would get this, Jamie, you got to meet Topher at such and such a place at the, room, and Topher needs to talk to you. And it being like, oh no, what did I do this time? But also being like, we had to learn to have a teachable heart. There were so many core values that I carry now in my life as a mother, as a wife, as a business owner, that internship, even though it was radical and even though it was so challenging, I'm super grateful for it. And the times that I thought this is unfair, or I've been misunderstood, or this isn't how it should be done, I actually learned how to grow from those situations. And so here's what I want to encourage you in, is that with every testimony, with every growth, there always is a test. There always is going to be a season of pressure, and whatever that looks like for you. I want to encourage you, part of growing a successful company, when people ask me, Jamie, how did you do it? How did you grow this business? And sometimes I think about the question, and it kind of, I marvel at it, because I think, man, if there's anybody, if I can do it, anyone can do this, because I was the least likely to accomplish something of this nature. But I know the power of what God has done in my own life, and I know the power of resilience and endurance. And our verse for the internship was, make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And that was something that was drilled into our heads over and over again. Make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. That's in the scriptures. And so I want to encourage you to, first of all, take a look at your life right now. if there are areas where you're like, I don't have what I want or haven't got my breakthrough, as I say this to you, this is something that I read and heard not too long ago. And instead of feeling bad about it, I actually felt this sense of freedom, not only because it's the truth, but because it took the pressure off of me feeling like, man, I deserve this. How come it's not happening? And the statement was, if you haven't gotten what you want yet, it's because you aren't worthy of it. Because you and then I thought, you know what? That's so true. It's not because if we think, man, I'm worthy of this thing right now, I deserve this and I don't have it, then it sets the stage for entitlement. It sets the stage for us to actually not put the work in. But if we don't have what we want yet, it's because we haven't done enough reps. It's because we haven't done the thing over and over and over again. And that's what happened in my internship for 2 years. We did the same hard things every day for 2 years, and you either submitted to the process. And what was really great too is that there was so much promotion that came from surrendering and submitting to the process, as far as like being able to lead more, and whether what they did, um, was right or wrong. And I know that there were a lot of parents that were like, my child shouldn't have to go through this, but I'm super grateful that my dad handled it the way that he did. That he didn't pamper me, not even for a minute. And it was always like, Jamie, bite the bullet. And his whole thing was keep your heart pure and do the work. And so I want to encourage you to keep your heart pure, to do the work. If you don't have what you want yet, put in the reps. And most of the time, we need permission more than we need to be told what to do, right? You probably know intuitively right now what your next step needs to be. And I could give you all the frameworks of how did I build a 7-figure business and an 8-figure business, and how do I break my first 6 figures? And I will absolutely be teaching those things because those are important and the tactics are important. But if you could become resilient in your life and endure the hardships as discipline and become the type of person that has grit enough that no matter what obstacle you come up against, that you will continue to have fortitude through all of it and don't give up. And that is one thing that I have been able to, that's one thing that I can say is that God has somehow, I look at all the twists and turns of my life and all the little minor moments where I said yes instead of saying no, or I said, yes, I will handle this, or I will overcome here, when it would have been so easy to cave and crash and say, I can't, and I'm not. But I didn't do that. And actually, there have been times when I have failed at that part where I have said, I can't do that. And what ended up happening is it has just been a learning opportunity of, well, you know what? In the very beginning, I shouldn't have hired so-and-so. I should have figured that part out myself, not because it's not okay to like outsource, but if I'm operating from a place of I can't do that, then no, I would shift my perspective. And yes, I'm capable. And so the more I began to think correctly about what I was capable of learning and doing, and that's the thing is whatever you don't know how to do right now, you can learn. And resources are aplenty. And not enough of you are doing the reps. You're not putting the work in. And we can get so much in a season of learning. And I remember getting into that. Got caught in that trap a little bit when I was going from farmers markets before we hit our first 6 figures and 7 figures. I spent quite a bit of time like studying the funnel world and studying digital marketing and hiring some people to build funnels for me. And then it ended up being a total train wreck disaster. And I got so much into learning mode and I bought courses from people. And I absolutely recommend that you invest in training and invest in mentorship and invest in reading the books and invest in your time into listening to the podcast. Don't shortchange and don't cut corners there. But also, don't get caught up in just the learning. You've got to do. And most of you have learned a lot to the point where you can take the first step and the second step. And then you've got to be resilient and enduring in the process every obstacle you have or any valley that you come up against is just a short season. If you're in a season of being in a valley right now, or what feels like a valley, it doesn't have to be that way. Shift your perspective. Um, Continue to thank and praise God in this season, and then use your mind to think your way out of the obstacles and ask the Holy Spirit to give you divine direction and wisdom, and He will guide you into all truth. And not enough of us have learned how to war and go to battle in the Word, and I've talked about that a lot, and that's something I want you to hear over and over and over again. The Word of God is a weapon that you can use, and it is a shield for you, and it's going to give you um it's a roadmap. And if you know how to go into the scriptures hunting for treasure and go to battle, and you know and what always comes to mind is the kingdom of heaven suffers violence, but the violent take it by force. And we as believers have to be the ones with resilience and fortitude and keep going and not be the weak ones that are giving up. And I want to see that end. I want to see the body of Christ rise in all her glory and all her strength and move into her destiny. And it's going to take wisdom and discernment. It's going to take using the mind of Christ. It's going to take action, fierce action. And guess what? There's no secret sauce. It's really the simple, boring, mundane things that you have to do every day consistently, and keep doing those reps. I talked to our ladies today on a live call, and I said, I'm in a major like body transformation right now. I'm going to the gym, and I'm going early, and I'm working out, and I'm doing all the food things. And the first 2 months of this process, I haven't really seen that many results, except for I feel more flexible, I feel stronger, but I'm not like shredding or losing a ton of weight or getting smaller very much. It's a slow process, but I know, because I'm not in this thing to like just lose a bunch of weight. I'm in this to get strong and to build my body up. I'm in it for the long haul. And so keep your why in front of you. Stay true to the course and keep moving forward, and keep your vision in front of you, and then keep going and don't give up. And if I can be one voice in your head, it's keep going, don't give up, keep going, don't give up, just do it, just do it, just do it, just do it. And keep submitting to the process, and eat the crappy food and eat the scary food, and do it with a smile on your face, knowing that that's going to be a blip in the radar, and you're going to pass a test, and it's going to take you into the next season of glory. And keep doing the reps, because strength will come, fortitude will come, and transformation will come. And it'll come internally, and it will come in your business and in your finances. Those things will happen. And I just want to encourage you. You have everything you need. You have what you need. You just need to go, and you just need to keep building and keep moving forward. And I'm in the same journey, and of going from 7 and 8 to 9 figures. It's interesting. I think about, man, it was so hard and yet so simple to get here. And now I'm like, really, we're solving bigger problems. I'm like, to get to from 10 to 20 million, man, there's some big codes we're cracking. I have to be a totally different kind of leader now. Now it's about finding the who's. It's not about wearing all the hats. And it's about, gosh, we better hire the right people, because there's a lot of delegation happening, and I'm empowering the team to make big decisions without me. And I'm training them up to know how to understand how to make the right decisions. And so there's just a whole new level of growth now. Actually, Judah was on calls with me today. I do my calls on Mondays. My schedule is packet full Mondays, so that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I can be creating content and thinking and building and solving problems and using my mind with no interruption, little interruption, I should say. I'm not booked unless I have to be. So I'm having Judah join me on my calls now, because this is part of his schooling, is learning the business. And so he was on the financial calls with the CFO, and he was on the team calls, and he was on the calls with the social media team. And I was like, Judah, how did you feel about being on calls today? What did you think? And he's like, what really stood out to me is like how cool it is that we have a team. And I think, man, praise God, because there were a lot of years in the beginning that I didn't. I had to wear all the hats. And so there's so much to look forward in the season that you're in right now. I look back on those early years, and I remember Nathan even telling me, one day we're going to look back and we're going to long for the simple days. And I don't want to say that I long for the simple days, but I certainly reminisce with joy and thinking about, man, those hard times we had in the early days and those early years when I was trying to figure out how to like make a bar of soap and how to market a product and how to, get into stores and then like get into big box stores, and financial mistakes I made and investing in advertising in the wrong places. And I remember getting a phone call from a pretty big magazine and they were like, yeah, would you like to, buy a page? That was a dumb purchase. I realize now that, advertising in magazines is more about credibility than it is about traffic. So doing things out of order, but you just kind of figure it out, right? And like I look back now and I revel in what we went through to get to this point. And now I think like we're living in the simple days when we're doubling and doing more than, and we've got this, you know, when we start to get into that, critical mass kind of growth, I might look back and be like, man, these were the simple times and these were the simple days. And I've started focusing less on pushing hard and growing super big to, man, I'm here to serve our people and I'm okay with growing at a healthy, steady pace and not pushing so hard where it's at the sacrifice of my family or um because we've got to have fun in life. And um so the secrets are in the stories. As I'm sharing stories with you, I'm hoping, I'm believing that you're gonna relate to this in some way, and you're gonna be able to take one little nugget out of this and say, that was for me. I needed that. And again, there's all kinds of tactical things I can teach and I will teach, but I'm gonna be sharing more stories about my time overseas, my time in my internship, my time in the corporate world, and a lot of the mistakes I made and then what we did to start our business and then to grow through every milestone, all the little nuanced decisions that we made to get us to where we are. I hope that as you hear these stories that you're not only encouraged, but you are more and more inspired and driven to keep pursuing your vision and your dream and keep moving forward and letting the process develop resilience and grit inside of you, because that's what you need ultimately, is to master the inner game, and you will do it. And the millions are there waiting for you. And let me just tell you, when the breakthrough happens, you might forget some of these hard times. And so take a moment and start documenting your journey. Okay, so I've given you lots of things to think about. And your assignment is today is like take some time and reflect and just write one thing about what's happening in your season right now that you want to look back and never forget. And again, okay, let's wrap this up. Click on the show notes. Share with us your feedback. I want to know what you're thinking and how you're doing. And we're creating some really cool things for our community right now that I cannot wait to tell you more about. So click on the show notes, share with us, and we will see you more on the inside.
Thanks for listening to today's show. Hit subscribe or follow, and be sure to share this episode with a friend.